Hey YouTube, it's Kevin Francis, astrophotographer. Wanted to get back with you on StarTools at a higher level. So this is the more advanced video with StarTools, and I think this is going to come out a lot better because I bought a separate microphone. So it's going to sound a whole lot better than my other voiceover videos. Guarantee it this time, okay? So let's start. Let's talk about StarTools. Okay, so let's look at StarTools. Let's start with the layout of StarTools. It's relatively simple. You've got module links or buttons on the left-hand side. Okay, and right now none of them are highlighted because we don't have an image loaded. And at the top you have other functions. These will change as you are going through the different modules here on the left, as well as you'll see over here in this area a few other buttons pop up alongside of the zoom and zoom in and zoom out buttons. But at the top you've got open, so we're going to use this here to open up an image here in a minute. You've got compose, so if you've got narrowband images that you've got RGB and you want to pull them in, you pull them in using the compose button, and then it will put all of them together to create your image that you can start editing. At the end, you'll get a save button, provided you've actually paid for your version of StarTools. Otherwise, you can do all this work, can't save it. You got the undo, so if you make mistakes, you can undo your mistakes. And you've got mask, which we'll talk about later. Tracking, what we'll talk about a little bit here. Tracking is for watching and looking at every pixel through every step of the process. So StarTools memorizes the changes to every pixel so that it understands where noise is located, and it can address that at the end of our processing. At the end of our linear processing, it can do a really good job of taking the noise out. And then there's restore, which is you want to go back several steps if you want to. Of course, there's a button for and about. Okay, so this is the generic layout, which is pretty good. It's just a matter now of knowing what do each of these buttons on the left-hand side do. And for me, I'm not a PhD level user of StarTools. I'm only going to go through what I know best and have got some experience with, and some additional detail that you may not see anywhere else. And we'll go into that. But absolutely, I don't do everything that's on here. I'm sure there's an opportunity for me to do so, but I haven't really gotten to the point where my images are really crisp to begin with. In terms of acquisition, I'm still using secondhand telescopes. I'm still modifying telescopes to get what I want. I haven't spent significant amount of money. This is one of the reasons why I'm using StarTools. It's $45 US, thereabouts, to purchase. So for me, this is really good. The results I get are really good for what I'm able to put into it. So that's a good point to remember. No editing software, post-processing software, is going to make something that isn't good going in look better than it was going in. So whatever signal to noise ratio you have in the images that you captured, that is what it is. That's what you're going to edit. So to me, it doesn't matter what software package it is. There isn't really one that's going to take crappy work and make it good work. So if it's good work, it's going to make it great work. All right. So now let's look at the generic workflow that when you're just starting out, you can try this and get really good results. Okay. So opening up and looking at the left-hand side here of the tool set, you can see there's auto dev, develop, bin, crop, wipe, contrast, decon, which is short for deconvolution, sharp. Then there's HDR, which is an acronym for high dynamic range. You got life, color, filter, entropy, and denoise. Then you have flux, band, heal, repair, shrink, synth, lens, layer, mirror H, mirror V, and rotate. There's a lot of things you can do here, but the generic, simple, really quick way to get to using StarTools and getting results out of it is to first start with everything over here on the left at the very top two sections. So you can see there's a gap between sections. So we're going to start with the top two sections, and we're going to start with Auto Dev. You're just going to click that button, and you go to not change any settings. Just go ahead and accept it. So there's a button in there, and I'll show you that in a little bit, where you say keep. So you click keep. You go down to bin. Okay, so bin is to basically make the images smaller, all right, so that you can work with a smaller image. It's similar to 2x2 binning or 3x3 binning on your camera. You can actually let that be on your camera at 1x1, and then you can do a 2x2 here in StarTools. Crop, I think that's pretty straightforward. So you just crop, then you do white, let that just do its thing. You go to contrast, then you go to deconvolution, sharp, HDR, life, color, filter, entropy, and then denoise. That's the last thing you do. When you're done with that, you can save it. So that is the generic, starting to right out the box, not knowing a whole lot of StarTools path that you can take to get to post-processing your first or initial sets of photos in this hobby. Okay, so I'm going to open up an image that I have on my drive here. One that I think I have dealt with before with you guys on a video that probably didn't sound so good. I take the blame for that. So let me see here. All right, Crescent Nebula. So loading that up. So one of the things that's important to start to remember that this is fully customizable to your needs. So I'm going to show you how I do StarTools, the way that I do StarTools. And so my workflow is different than what I showed you, is different than the generic one. Yours will be different as well. So as you tailor your post-processing to your equipment, to your acquisition capabilities, you're going to have a different flow, and you're going to have different edits and different changes that you make as you go through this process. So I'm going to show you mine. Hopefully this gives you some insight that helps you tailor your workflow to your capabilities and your acquisition. All right, so getting back to this. So it's pulling it up. And first thing it says is, what type of data set do you have? Is it linear? And so if it's linear, you want to click linear. And it tells you, it asks you the questions here. Choose linear if the pixels in the data set have never been stretched. I say never, but it says not. Choose linear if it's from an OSC or DSLR, and not white balance if the pixels in the data set have not been non-linearly stretched. Okay, so that's a lot to say in that sentence. You know how you captured your images. You know what was done in pre-processing before you get it to this point. And if any of these things match that, this is where you choose the linear from OSCR button. Then the next one is non-linear. This means it's an image that was stretched and pre-edited some other software package, but you want to use StarTools to finish it up. That's where you go here. And then if you're not sure, you have no idea, you just maybe downloaded an image from the internet and you don't know, then you click on I'm not sure. So in this case, for me, I know it's linear. I'm going to go with that. So let's talk about binning. As I said earlier, binning is a method that you could use to improve the quality of your images based on the difficulty or the size of the object or the seeing conditions or any number of reasons, right? So that's where you can take, even on the acquisition side within, say, APT, for example, you can change your camera to, instead of do 1x1 binning, it can do 2x2. And all that means is it's taking 4 pixels and treating it as 1. So 4 pixels in the square, it's going to treat it as 1. And you can do the same thing here within StarTools. All right, so this is what binning is meant for. Now, I have found another reason to do that here in StarTools, which is this computer. This is a laptop computer that I do most of my acquisitions on, most of my processing on, and it has 4 processors. So it's it can be bogged down. It can be very slow based on what's being done on this laptop. And so to speed things up, I sacrifice quality by binning my objects and binning my images first. So this is where I start. This is where I start. So not necessarily where you're going to start. If you have a computer that's got processing power, you can just power right on through these large images and run StarTools a lot faster and get to your results. This may be better for you to start somewhere else, which would be the next step that I'm going to show you here. So first off, let me bin this. If you click on bin, I'm also doing this for the sake of time for this video, because it will be a long video. It's already set this up. If you look at the bottom, scale and noise reduction of 50%. So basically the image is now 50% its size. So the X and Y values of the size of this pixels is now 2748 by 1836. So you want to say keep it, and StarTools will go through that process of shrinking it down, and then that's what we will use for the rest of the video. So now that binning is done, we're back to this initial screen, and you can see the image is pretty dark. So now let's see what we got here in the image, right? We've already stacked this, so we kind of have an idea, but let's see what's here. Let's see what we've got to deal with. So next thing we're going to do is click on Auto Dev. And the reason for clicking on Auto Dev is because we want to get to the point of understanding what we're dealing with in terms of light pollution. I want to know what we're dealing with in terms of stacking artifacts, things like that. So as you can see on the screen, now it's done an initial stretch, and so you can see there's a lot of pollution, light pollution that we're dealing with here in this photo. But other than that, it looks pretty good. I don't see too many stacking artifacts, but I don't know that at all. I do know that when I stacked it, that the Deep Sky Stacker had to adjust the locations of each of the photos in the stack. So there's probably some stacking artifacts just way out on the edges. So I'm going to be a bit conservative, and I'm going to crop it at this in my next step. So now that I've looked at this and I've reviewed it, I'm going to keep it, and then we're going to do a crop. All right, so it's quick. And so now what we're going to do is we're going to crop this. So we're going to click on the crop button. And here you can see that there's crosshairs, right? And so you can click keep. I don't know what the ST art means, but we can click it right now and see what that does. Oh, didn't do anything there. Typically what I'll do is I'll come in with my mouse and I will select the area that I want to crop, like so. Till I get something that I think will work, that's taking out along the edges for sure any stacking artifacts that come from stacking. That cleared it, so good. That's what the ST art does. So I brought it back to 0. Really what I want to do is I'm going to bring it in 10 pixels on each side. So you can do that also by using the sliders on the bottom. So I'm going to take the first X, if you look, I'm going to take that down to 10 or up to 10 pixels. Okay, and so let's move the line over here over 10 pixels. I'm going to move this side over 10 pixels as well. So I'm going to click that until I get to -10 here in the middle. And we're going to follow the same pattern over here for the Y axis. And we're going to go 10 pixels, 10 pixels, and 10 pixels. Okay, so that's my crop. I think that's enough to take care of any stacking artifacts that may be there. And so now I'm going to keep it. So obviously with this step, if you have vignetting, if you have, let's say sky glow or amp glow, any other type of defects that you see, you know, maybe some dust got on your lens and you see that dust ball
on the edges or some part of your image, right? You could utilize cropping as an opportunity to just get it out of the way. Just remove it, crop it out, and keep right on moving. You don't have to deal with it. If a lot of those things are within the area of your image that you care most about, then we'll do something else later for those. But again, in cropping, that's your first opportunity to get rid of any of the defects you have.
All right, so now we've done the crop. So let's go ahead and move on to the next step, which is to wipe. So wipe is simply your first opportunity to get rid of stacking artifacts. Now, before we get too deep into this, we need to understand masking.
So masking is your opportunity to protect things that you need to protect and work on the things you need to work on, right? So it's the same in GIMP, it's the same in other processing tools, Photoshop.
We're going to look at some masking here to understand what we're working on. So I really just want to work on the background more than anything else. So I'm going to try something here for the first time in my mask. I'm actually going to try and select all the stars. So hit mask, then I'm going to click auto. It's probably not a good time to do something for the first time and see if it works on camera. But I can edit this out. All right, so I'm going to hit stars. Then I'm going to click do. Now it's going to go through its iterations of trying to find all of the stars in the image. Okay, now notice everything here is green, so I'm going to shrink till I'm starting to only see stars be selected. So because what it's done is it's found also noise, it's found a lot of noise, it's found other pixels that it thinks is a star. And so I'm just going to shrink it down until I get to where I have very little of the small flakes or specks to none. Once I feel like I've got those gone, then I'm going to do a grow one more time just to make sure that I am filling in the stars fully that I do see. I'm going to scan around and make sure I still have stars selected. Now, if not, if there's stars that I want to select that the tool has not picked out, if you look here at the bottom, it says flood fill lighter pixels, and you can go in here and you can then actually click on the pixels that you think should be highlighted like that, and then you'll flood fill it and you will select that star.
Okay, so that's how you would do that. So there's a few, but it's not a lot. I think most of what's here is selected, which is good. So that's excellent. Now, what shouldn't be selected here
is some of the nebulosity in the Crescent Nebula here. This is not a star. So we'll click that off. We'll click that off. We'll click that off. That one. This one. That. All right, so if it's already been filled, you can unfill it just by clicking on it. Make sure that you know that that is not a star, right? So you don't want to unclick a star. If you do, you just click it again, and then it'll fill right back up. Or there's an undo button here, and it will only undo your last step in the process. Okay, so I'm going to try and finish this up here real quick. Undo that. Undo that one. That's kind of tiny. Undo that. Undo. Oh, that's actually a star. Undo that. Okay, it's kind of pink. That would be Crescent Nebula.
Now, if you're not exactly perfect with all of this, there's opportunity to do it again, but to be thorough, this is going to take a little bit of time depending upon the image that you have. So this one really does show what I want you to see is that some portions of what you're working on is going to take some time even in StarTools. There are some really quick ways to do star selection in other tools. And I'm sure if you look around the internet, you'll see plenty of people out there like Nico Carver who has some really slick ways of doing that within GIMP and Photoshop and things like that. So follow those guys and they can show you those really cool tricks to get you selecting stars a whole lot faster than this. I'm gonna tell you, this takes a little bit of effort. Okay, but I think that's good. So, because that's not really what I wanted to have selected, or at least in that manner, I didn't want to have selected. I think all of those stars look pretty good there. Okay, so now I'm going to take one more step here. Okay, so before, because everything that's green, that's what the system's going to work on. Well, I don't want to work just on the stars. I want to work on the background. But I don't want to work on too much of the stuff that shouldn't really be worked on. I don't want to lose much of the nebulosity that I see throughout this photo. And so I'm seeing a large chunk of nebulosity over here. And I also don't want to lose any signal to noise ratio here within the crescent nebula itself. So come down to the bottom. We're going to change this and we're going to click on it. We're going to click on lasso. All right. And we're going to just take that around the crescent nebula like this. Okay. So that's currently protected. And it's kind of hard to see all this nebulosity around here. So I'm just going to do a little bit like this. This side doesn't necessarily have to be perfect. Okay, so everything is selected initially that I want to protect. These are the things I don't want to be worked on for the wipe. But in order for it to work on the background and get that right, we got to invert it. So that's the next step. Now it's inverted. So it will not work on anything that's not green. Okay, all right, so that's good enough. So we'll keep that. Good. Now, next thing is you got some options here at the top that you want to take a look at. So you got gradient, vignetting, narrowband, and amp flow. Amp flow we don't have, so that's where the camera sensor has some heating or some sort of thermal noise that's showing up in your image. But that can actually be calibrated out with dark frames. So you take your dark frames and you know you have amp flow. When you stack with those dark frames that have the amp flow in it, and it should remove those. But in case it doesn't and you didn't notice it, there is an amp flow option here which works probably too good, I would say, in StarTools, because then it makes it very difficult to match the background. But it will get rid of your amp flow. Now there's a narrowband option for if you're using narrowband filters. So if you did the compose before and you put in your H alpha, your O2, your O3, and your S2, then this is probably a good choice to use narrowband here in this section. I would use narrowband as well because I use the the L Pro Enhance filter, which is a dual narrowband filter. Now there's vignetting. If you see that here, this is the time to pick that. And if it's just a almost flat gradient across, like it's truly light pollution, then you would pick the gradient here up front. So I'm going to pick narrowband. All right, and it's changed the settings at the bottom. I'm not going to change any of these. I found that when I change this, I can't make it any better. So I'm going to leave it the way it is, and then I'm going to click do. And this is going to go through the process of wiping clean the gradients that are on this image. All right, so that took a little while. Again, it's the laptop. So here's the first wipe result. And I'd say that looks pretty good. There are some lanes or lines here and some dark areas that don't necessarily jive. So we'll end up dealing with that in GIMP later. But most of it looks actually pretty good. So I'm gonna take this for what it is and move on to the next step. So we're gonna hit keep. So there's one piece that I didn't mention with wipe. So as you saw, it gave you a stretched version of that. So it automatically does an auto dev during the for the wipe or after the wipe, so that you can see what it's going to look like once you go back and finish up your final auto dev, which is the next step that we're going to take.
So back to the buttons here. So this is going to round out the top section here. So we got to do the final auto dev. Okay. And in doing the auto dev, we're going to get a question that comes up immediately that we've got to answer. When I say immediate, my computer's slow. All right, so it brings it up. It says this was previously stretched. Do you want to redo the global stretch, or you want to stretch the image as is?
So what I've learned is once you've already stretched it and you've cropped and you've done all these other steps, then you want to go back and redo your global stretch. If you stretched it and you've gone out and you came back and you want to just start from scratch, then you can stretch the image as is.
So I'm going to redo the global stretch. And so this is beginning the process of stretching. So while it's doing that, I'm going to set what's called a region of influence. You do that by taking the mouse and you select the area on the screen that you want to be your region of influence. So I'm selecting the Crescent Nebula as my region of influence. And the reason for that is
I want StarTools to know that as it's doing its stretch, which things are a priority, which things are not necessarily priority.
As you can see, it's already darkened the background and highlighted the nebulosity a lot more just by selecting the Crescent Nebula. Now you can play around with this as you go for your images and your objects to see what makes sense, because you can put it somewhere else in the night sky, or you can put it on a different nebulosity piece here in this photo, and you'll see things start to change. So the only other thing that I do is I go down here that says outside region of influence or outside ROI influence. I bring that down to about 10%. Because again, I want to make sure the background is as neutral as possible. Not too dark. I'm not trying to get the black point knocked out of here. But I do want to make sure that I don't have too much to have to deal with later due to brightness or it not being stretched accordingly. Okay, so for me, I think that looks pretty good. So I'm going to take that now, and again, we're going to say keep, and we're going to move on to the other fun stuff we got to do.
Okay, so before we move on to the next step, let's remember we did a mask. So that mask has parts of it that are covered, parts are not covered, and we're going to take a few steps now where we probably want to have a full mask. So let's go ahead and do that now, and there's a really quick and easy way to do that.
Click on mask up top, and it shows you your last mask. We're just going to hit clear, then invert, and keep. That's it. We've covered everything now in the mask. So now we're going to talk about contrast. So that button is over there to the left, and I utilize this next
before I do deconvolution. I also utilize Sharp as well before I do deconvolution, because I think it helps in most of the time, not all the time, but it helps deconvolution select the stars appropriately in its algorithm there. So let me go to contrast here real quick.
Which shouldn't take long. And so we've got everything selected. There's not a whole lot of options to deal with. You've got dark anomaly filter, headroom, aggressiveness. So if you want this more aggressive, you can bring this up. If you want it less aggressive, you can bring it down. Precision just means how precise it is with each of the pixels that it is working to. So StarTools works at a pixel level.
At least that's what they say on their website. So that's why you're going to see a lot of these where it says precision. Now, the more precision you put on it, you raise this up, the longer it will take to do the work. So it just takes more effort to do that.
So I'm going to leave that where it is. Certainly not going to change anything else here. I think this is good enough. I'm going to hit do. Um, and so really, it's just really right now just making sure that the contrast is optimally set for the image before for me specifically, not for anyone else. Just before we get to deconvolution, so we can do that appropriately. All right, so that's almost done. Okay, so it's done. And in all of these modules, there's a before after button. So if you click it, you can see what it looked like before. All right, so here's before, here's after. Here's before, here's after. Yeah, it's a pretty significant change. I didn't change the aggressiveness. I didn't change any of the dark anomaly, nothing down here. And look at what it's done to this photo. So I think it's done a really good job there. I'm going to say keep, and we'll move on to the next step.
Okay, so let's do sharp, and then we'll do deconvolution. Pretty straightforward.
Sharp, we're going to click on the sharp button. Then we're going to click on next. There's not a lot of changes that I'm going to make here. You can change the structure size to larger or smaller.
I'm actually very much impressed with this ability to do this. It does what it calls a wavelet sharpening. And you can adjust
on sharp a lot of the different scales, right? So this is similar to those of you who dealt with registats and its wavelet sharpening.
It is pretty much the same. StarTools will tell you on their website it is not. But as far as these sliders are concerned,
it's very similar, I'll say that. And yes, so there's a lot of options here that you can change. For me, again, this is not an area where I'm an expert in it to be able to tell you what to change. I just don't touch it. I let it do its thing. I do it before and then after, and I say, okay, yeah, it's sharper now. It looks good. I can deal with that. And so I'm going to say keep. And now it's time to do deconvolution.
So why deconvolution? So before we get into that, why do deconvolution? Well, we're talking about fixing the seeing issues or diffraction limiting issues that are occurring when you acquire your images at night. These are things you can't control. So if most of us here live on sea level and we're taking photos from sea level, you're going to have some atmospheric conditions that are showing up in your image. So deconvolution is to help fix that. And so what deconvolution is going to do,
if we click on that button, first thing it's going to do is going to say, listen, we need to create a mask. We find all the stars, protect them. We don't want to do anything with the stars. We're going to fix the background. So you can ask it to generate a mask automatically, and it will go through and do that. Now, there are times where it will struggle to find all of the stars, and all that's telling you is you just got a really bad photo to deal with. So you want to make sure your acquisition good as you can get it, and that goes for every software package out there. So here it is. You can see that it's found some stars, mostly the large ones, and it immediately jumps right into the deconvolution process.
So this can take some time because it's going through the entire image to make those adjustments for you. And so I'm going to pause here and then we'll come right back.
All right, so it's done. Let's take a look at what we see here. So we're going to use this before after just to see what has changed. So if you take a look, let's take a look like right here. All right, you keep your eye there. I'm going to do before and after. What do you see? You see a little deformation of that star, right? That's not what we want. Same thing up here. Okay.
And part of this is that my acquisition wasn't that great, right? So it's probably related to my polar alignment or how it was stacked. Polar alignment to me looked really good. Maybe a couple of my stacking parameters weren't correct and it sort of smudged it out. Or maybe I really should have done some binning to shrink those stars into a more concise ball. No. There's plenty of things here I don't know, but I do know that I don't want to deform the stars with deconvolution.
So, how do we fix this? Well, let's look again. So I know this is the star that is deformed, so we're just going to take and put a box over these groups of stars here. Okay. All right, so that's going to highlight that. So what I'm going to do, because it's in the essence of time, I'm going to, let's reduce the radius first. So reduce the radius to, like, say 1.2 pixels. Okay, and it's immediately going to do it, and it's only going to do it in this area. Okay, so we'll see very quickly what kind of changes we made. So before, after. There's still some deformation of those stars. Before, after. Before, after. The other thing we can do is, I think, is increase the mask buzz. All right, so that's after, before, after, before, after. Okay, so that really didn't do much for me, increasing the fuzz. Maybe we'll take it down. Before, after. Nope, still didn't do it. All right, so let's bring that back to where it was. I think it was at 4 pixels. Again, I'm not an expert in all this stuff, so what I do know is changing the radius helps. So I'll bring it down to about 1. And as you can see, before, after. So there's a slight change to the star. All right, so there was some deconvolution that occurred, and we got a slight change to that star. We got some seeing conditions that were fixed, but we didn't change the star to something that it shouldn't look like. Okay, so that's a good deal. So now that we've got that, but at least for this section, now we're going to hit all, and it's going to do it for the entire picture.
Again, that's going to take some time to go through. So once it's done, we'll take a look at the entire photo just to make sure we didn't miss anything and need to make any more adjustments there. I don't think we will. And so then what we're going to do is go on to the next step. All right, so we've done most of the steps already, at least for my workflow. So let's jump into, we're going to get finished here. We got HDR left. We have color left, and then we have the noise operation to do last.
So let's finish this up. Let's go into HDR. This is also a fun one.
So HDR stands for high dynamic range. This is where you get to play with a group of different algorithms that help you figure out where's the best place to pull out the details that you work so hard to capture that night. So HDR is actually one of the more powerful algorithm sets that I play with here in StarTools because it can do so much.
So let's look at that here right now. So we're in HDR, start it up, and immediately goes through and it does what's called a reveal all. And how I know that is, if you look at the bottom here, it tells you which algorithm it's working on. It says reveal all, and over here, the circles that we saw was telling you it was actually doing something, right? At the top, you have optimize, equalize, tame, and reveal. Those are the top 4 options or algorithms you can choose there. But I like to use the arrows at the bottom, and I'll show you in a minute. So now that that's done, let's do a before after. Okay, very subtle change. I think it's probably hard for you to see with this YouTube compression, but I'm going to tell you it didn't do much. Okay, so I'm going to not keep this one. All right, and I'm going to move to the next one, which is reveal the DSO core. This is probably not the best photo to use for that. You see it was very quick. But if you had Andromeda here, okay, you know Andromeda has a really bright core. The same thing for the Orion Nebula. You know, it's got a bright core.
This algorithm does a really good job of revealing that core for you. So instead of going out there and taking ISO 1600 photos and ISO 800 photos for Andromeda and combining the two so that you can make sure you can pull out the core, you could use this algorithm, the reveal DSO core, algorithm, and it will do a really good job of pulling it out for you. You don't have to do all that extra work.
Here's the next one. It's called Tame Highlights, which is the same thing up here as Tame. So this is going to go through. So there's a lot to go through here in this photo. There's nebulosity all over the place. So there's highlights all over. So it's going to take a little bit of time, but typically this is one of the ones that I use the most, which is taming highlights, even reveal DSO core. I like those when they perform their work on my images, and that's typically what I'll show you.
The nice thing about this part of StarTools is that you can run HDR over and over again. So let's say you liked how it did the tame highlights, but you also like how it did the DSO core reveal. You can do both. So you can do the DSO core reveal, keep it, come back, tame highlights. Keep it, come back, optimize if you wanted to. Okay, so that's actually a nice little feature in StarTools that they don't say much on their or at all, anything at all on their website, and I think it's actually a cool feature.
Okay, so hopefully this is done here shortly, because like I said, there's a lot of pixels here to go through this particular image in order to tame these highlights. Okay, so it's done. Again, that took a little bit of time, but it's done now. So let's do the before after, and hopefully you can see the tame highlights here. It's actually very, very subtle, but for me, subtle enough. I like it, so I may want to keep that one. But for sake of education and for those of you watching, there's a few other algorithms here. So optimize hard. Optimize hard is basically going to optimize everything, which would include your noise. So you want to be careful with this one. It does do a good job of basically brightening up the items that you want to brighten up. So let's say here the Crescent Nebula and this nebulosity over here, you want to brighten that up. You want to make sure that is visible. The stars are truly, they're popping. They're not growing in size, but just, so you can do that here with Optimize Hard. So there you go. I'm thinking you can see that here on the video in the before after, much brighter. If there's one more, which is called Optimize Soft, and then there's Equalize. Equalize I don't recommend for anybody. It just brightens up everything equally. There's no science behind that. Optimize Soft does the optimization, just not as much as say on the hard side. So you can see that is very subtle. But I'm going to actually, in this case, I'm just going to stick with Optimize Hard because I think that's good. Wanted to brighten that up a little bit more. We'll keep that, and then we'll move on to the next step.
Okay, so now let's put some color to this image, and so that is my next step. I don't do life.
I don't do filter, entropy. I will do denoise, but it won't be from this button. So really in my workflow, I go from here down to color and I stop. I haven't found too much good coming from other things here. Now for color, let's go ahead and do that, because that was really my last step before denoising. So we'll click on color, and immediately color is going to ask you some questions, and it's going to be related to your mask. All right, so we did the deconvolution and we didn't go back and fix the mask to include all the stars.
Well, stars have color. We want to make sure those colors are shown.
We're going to say fill mask instead of keep it. We're going to fill it. Okay, it means the entire space of the image, and it's going to go through its algorithms to generate the color profile or color palette for this photo. There's a lot of options here, so let's walk through those as it's right now trying to do the first step. So at the top, you got a reset, you got a sample, which I don't use. You got a mask if you want to mask off some things and change color that way. Constancy, this is an algorithm, and as you can see at the bottom, this is the histogram for the constancy. This is the style. It's called the scientific color constancy, and all of these options are set based on clicking these buttons up here. Okay, so if you watch, I'm going to click on Legacy. All right, Legacy is making the change here at the bottom. Artistic, not detail aware. There's a histogram. So it's going to redo all of this color here for me based on these settings here. Now, what StarTools also does is it looks at red, green, and blue bias for you, and it immediately determines how much it wants to take out of there. So for green, it's taking a lot out. For blue, it's taking a bunch out, right? And it's left all of the red in there. Now, these things you can change. I have played with them in the past. I have not been successful at improving the results beyond what I have been able to achieve. But that's just me. Like right now, I see there's a lot of red in here, and I want to take that out. So, you know, this is not bad. It's colorizing some of these items, these dots here, green, which I think are noise. So there's one more option we can choose. That's Hubble. Let's click on that and let it do its thing. You can see, and then we'll see what the color looks like when we're done. You can also see here in this photo that there's a lot of nebulosity around the Crescent Nebula itself.
And so you can, at least from my acquisition skills, you can see that I was able to capture some of that, not a lot. So this, for me, is decent. I'm sure for some of you, you're probably looking at this like, yeah, I could do better than this. So, and that's fine. I'm happy you can. There's absolutely, the thing about this hobby is that, you know, each of us have different levels that we're have grown into, and we're happy with what we're able to get, and we take the challenge to try to improve beyond that. So certainly I have a ways to go still, but I think it's important for me to share my knowledge and my experience, because in hopes of those coming up behind me can learn something about StarTools and how to process these images and utilize it for their work.
So, I like this. This looks a lot more like what I see some of the others post out online. You know, some of the Crescent Nebula is sort of peachy, which is cool. This nebulosity is pinkish or some red. So I think that's pretty cool. You know, we could add more blues if we wanted to by reducing the blue slider here. The other thing that StarTools allows you to do is allows you to do what's called a max RGB, so you can see where the color is really propagating in your picture. I don't really use this all that well, but I think it's a cool feature. And then of course you could do your before after checks just to make sure you're happy with what you're seeing. The stars seem to be the right colors of reds and some blues, and I think I might want to add some blue back into that, see if those stars perk up a little more with a little more blue. As well, you can see the background is not too dark, but it's dark enough. All right, it's the sky, and it's we haven't clipped the black point, so this is sort of an important piece here. StarTools will not let you clip the black point, no matter how hard you try. Now in GIMP, I have clipped the black point quite simply, quite easily. I'm sure some of you have done that in the past, even by accident. But StarTools will not let you do that. So you have some level of protection just from that piece of it. All right, blue bias is all I was changing. Put some more blue back into there. Okay. All right, they changed the entire photo, not so much the stars. I'm not sure I like that, so I'm gonna put it back where it was, let it do its thing. Okay, so everything's done. I like this, so guess what I'm going to do? I'm going to hit keep, and we'll move on to the next step. We're done with most of the photo. What's left? Noise reduction. So we could easily just go click on this button and hit denoise and go through the noise reduction piece and be done with it. But as I told you earlier in the beginning of this video,
StarTools does what's called tracking. So it's tracking the happenings with each of the pixels in the image. So it knows what's going on with the noise, whether we're creating color noise, whether we're removing noise by doing certain actions that we've done before, or are we creating noise by doing deconvolution, for example? Are we creating more noise by doing contrast or sharpening or anything, right? And it's watching it. So now that it has this repository of all of that information related to noise, now's the best time to get rid of it because it knows where it is.
So we're going to do it a little bit differently. We're going to hit track. Track's going to say, hey, you're not going to be able to do any more linear processing. Are you sure you want to do this? You want to stop tracking and do noise reduction? You want to stop tracking and do no noise reduction? Or do you want to cancel and go back and do something else? So for me, important piece here, we've gone through all of this. I'm good. I'm going to stop tracking and do final noise reduction. So there are a number of different algorithms here that you can work with. So if you look here at the bottom filter type, you have the distance weighted outlier rejection. Guys, all I can tell you is go to the StarTools website and it can explain what each of these are. There's Gaussian noise diffusion, then there's median. I'm going to stick with Gaussian for now, which basically is going to smooth out the noise. I think distance weighted outlier rejection is going to remove noise as best it can, but that's no guarantee. And median is just going to do a median average of the noise. Now, what's important is see that it's zoomed in for you. So it's zoomed in for you so you can look directly at the noise and the grains that are there. And what it wants you to do at this point, if you read, calibrate the grain size parameter until noise, grain, and clumps can no longer be seen. Then you click next to continue. So you do this and it's going to change. Keep doing it. It's going to change. And you just don't want to see those clumps. You want those clumps to basically be blurry and hidden, like they don't exist. Right? I can still see a few. I'm at 4.9. Typically I get to around 6 with this camera that I have, this dedicated astronomy camera that I have, the ASI 183 MC Pro.
By ZWO, Ryman, climbing. Okay, enough of that. All right, so I think we're good here. And so now I'm going to click next. And then I'm going to go get a coffee, a sandwich, and some other snacks. And I'm going to wait for this to get done because it's going to take a long time. Hey, my friend, how you doing? This thing is still working. Time for some bubbly. I've got my computer here taking a long time getting through some processing of denoise. Dylan O'Donnell? No, don't know him either. You'll be the first to see this video, and then I'll release it to the world. It's all about StarTools. I think it's done now.
So it's finally done. And so let's take a look at the noise reduction. So how do we do that? So it's zoomed in for you, and you're going to go here to before. You see what the before looked like, and you're going to click the after. And you can see it did a really good job of taking care of the noise here. Probably one of the best that I've seen that I've worked with, right? So again, this works similar to the sharpening tool, right? Where it does it in a wavelet manner. So you can make adjustments to each wavelet to improve the noise characteristics here. You can ask it to do a nonlinear response. If you want to turn that on, you can change the grain dispersion. Maybe you didn't go far enough, or maybe you went too far and you're blurring out or losing signal to noise ratio here. Color detail loss, you can adjust that. So there's a lot here you could do. Again, like I said before, I'm not the expert on this, didn't design this, but I've done enough to know don't mess with this at this point. As I get to do more and more and I start to really play and dig deep into this, I'll absolutely be able to start changing a lot of these things here just from an experimentation standpoint, just to see what it does, to be able to provide additional inputs to anyone who is watching from me as we go. So I think this is pretty good. So I'm going to say keep. I'm going to say great. Time to save this file, because I got to go into GIMP and I got to get rid of this big old line right here in the middle. I don't know what that is, where it came from, but it's got to go. So I'm going to hit save. And I'm going to save this as StarTools. .tif. Keep in mind one really key point here that you should know. If you don't put the .tif at the end of this, StarTools will get mad at you. Don't know why the makers of this software package didn't just say, oh yeah, we're saving a TIFF file, so we may as well just call it TIFF, or have some function up here where you can choose the file type. But anyway, if you forget to put TIFF up here, it will get mad at you. So make sure you do that. I've done that way too many times. All right, and then save it, and now you've got it. And now I have it, so I'll be using it in GIMP later. So that's the tutorial today. Hope you liked it, and it's a lot of information here on StarTools. A lot of information that I did not share with you because, again, I don't have experience with it. But I think this is really detailed enough to get you to a place where Photoshop or GIMP can help you take it the rest of the way. So again, I hope you liked it. Hope you enjoyed it. Take a moment to like the video, subscribe if this is the first time you're coming to my channel, and look out for some more tutorials and other astrophotography related activities I have coming on the way. And finally, I'm just going to end with my normal saying, which is, the sky is only the limit when your mind is unwilling to fly. So go beyond. Thanks for watching. Kevin Francis, astrophotographer.